do you just before we all forget everything and no one remembers anything, but like, do you remember details from Chiaro de Luna Luna that day? Like, do you still have those specific moments, like a specific hand jam or um, some little snippet of detail? Like, is that still with you?
Yeah. The most memorable things are for me, I sat in the cave in the morning in the rain, just visualizing so hard, just like processing all, and I'd never done this before, which is cool. Like I processed all the emotions of like feeling the climb, and I went through every single motion of the climb before I climbed it to like, and then I like felt what I would feel while I was climbing it. And that was a really unique experience to like visualize the climb before having done it. And then when I actually climbed it, I climbed it the exact way that I visualized it. Because there was a pitch up high that when I climbed it the first time, it didn't feel, because I didn't onsite it. I had climbed the route before. So there was a pitch up high that didn't feel right to me. It didn't feel secure. But when I visualized it, I repositioned my body so that it would feel secure. And I went through every single motion of like how to make it feel secure. So then when I actually climbed that pitch, I climbed it perfectly. And that was really cool. And then like the low crux down low, I remember like stepping out over this little gap and it feeling exposed, but it's only one little move. Like I remember the details of the small bits and pieces, and then also like the feeling of like urgency of getting down, because I didn't stay at the summit for very long. I just got at the top, but I knew that I had to do the rappels solo with that little rope, and I wanted to be sure that I had enough time to make all the proper decisions. So I just kind of took off.
Yeah, you always remember the cruxes the most, like the couple little scary moments or like the hardest little thing. It's like
Hmm.
that's true for most of my big solos as well, where I'm like, wow, I remember the crux move, and I remember the one moment where I thought I got off route. It's like, you
Yeah.
remember all the sort of like scary things or the hard things.
Uh-huh.
And then the general feeling of contentment of reaching the summit, maybe, but then the rest
Yeah.
of it, you're sort of like all disappears in a blur of like 5'9" hand crack, where you're like, oh, I just like climbed 2,000 feet of 5'9". It was lovely. Just like
Uh-huh.
I totally remember.
What
Yeah.
about also like the ability to commit to something like that? Because like you can dream of doing these climbs all you want, but to actually like move forward and do it is like something else. So like you have to like be able to put yourself in the position of your dream, and that's a scary aspect of all of this. Just
Do, do you think that translates to other aspects of life? I mean, do you think that that ability to commit that you work on through climbing helps with other aspects of life?
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just something that comes down to the person themselves and whether they're willing to like commit to these sort of things. So I don't know if it helps life, but it kind of sh- it could be like an analogy of who that person is, or a way to like see how willing they are to pursue their dreams.
Yeah, I mean, I like this idea that all the hard soloing, all the risk taking is all just practice for real life. I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. It's like I always just thought of it as a as sort of self-serving as just its own like its own ends where you're like, I'm just going climbing. But I'm like, no, no, it turns out it was all just working on trying to be for me now, being a good dad. It's all part of being a good dad. I'm like,
Yeah.
we'll see.
You could write a book about it. Like write a little allegory about climbing and how that made you a better dad. I bet
Oh
you
my
could do
goodness.
that. You should do
I
it.
wonder I wonder if people would believe that. Be like, oh, all that free soloing made you a better dad. I'm like, maybe. Maybe.
You could twist it into a story that makes sense, I think.
Well, that's kind of at the heart of what we're talking about with risk taking and all that. It's like you can always twist it in whatever way you need to. I mean, you can
Hmm.
justify the risks how you want, but like ultimately, is it worth it? Like, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of the crux of all these conversations is like, how do you justify it for yourself, and is that worthwhile? I don't know.
I guess we'll never know. But for some reason, we're out here doing it, and it seems to be so far so good. I mean, if something tragic happens, I think that's something we each individually have to choose, to whether it's worth it to do something that would result in tragedy. And I'm not soloing all the time, and especially this year I'm focused on sport climbing, and I'm not alpine climbing all the time. But like last year I alpine climbed for like 2 years straight and hardly rock climbed. So I think it just depends on how much your time you're willing to spend out there, and then also dividing your time up and making sure you still have the right motivations to do it. This is also something I wondered about, like people who push themselves in the mountains, who push themselves to compete with others. Like if they want to make a faster time on an ascent, but in the mountains where there's objective hazard, I think that's kind of a dangerous motivation to be competitive with another, because I feel like when you're mountain climbing, you should really just do it for yourself, because all the risks you're taking on to yourself, versus like sport climbing, where it's fine if you see a friend who climbs a route and then you're like, oh, I want to climb it better. Or like, you know, you can have like a friendly competition going with friends in more of a safe, controlled environment. But when it comes to alpinism, I think you need to really ask why you're doing it, what are you going to get out of it, and whether you're doing it for yourself, because all the risk is coming down to that.
Do you think there's a lot of competition in alpinism?
I think there is. I think I see it. I see a lot of people comparing themselves, or like trying to do things that other people have done. It's kind of like, instead of finding your own creativity through climbing, it would be like trying to repeat what somebody else has done, or take somebody else's vision and make it your own. And I mean, to an extent, we always do that. We're always like seeing something cool and being like, oh, I want to try that, or like learning from others. But then there's a way to learn all these little tricks and then use your own motivation, or like find something that inspires you from yourself, instead of like trying to be better than somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's one of the cruxes of climbing, is parsing out those different motivations, because it's like you want to do it for yourself, but then sometimes it helps to have a little nudge or some kind of external motivation where you're like, oh, this other guy did it, like I can try to beat his time. And you use that to sort of push you to do something that you already want to do. But then, yeah, exactly. You never want to go too far down that road, or you don't want to take undue risks because you're competing with somebody else. But at the same time, you can harness motivations from any different source and kind of use them to help your climbing. It's just a matter of making sure you don't get into anything too dangerous that way.
Yeah, or push yourself out of line, or out of perspective, or take on more risks than you would have if you didn't have that external motivation.
Mm-hmm. How do you balance that with partners in the mountains? Because I mean, for all of our talking about soloing, you are generally climbing with a partner, and how do you balance the risk taking of another person? Like what if they want to do something much more extreme than you, or what if they're just not feeling it and they don't feel comfortable with terrain that you feel totally fine with? It's like, how do you balance the risk tolerance of your partner when you're in the mountains?
I always accept the risk tolerance of my partner if it's less than mine. If my partner is not comfortable, I just don't go. I never push my partner, which I don't know if that's a good thing, because I know we backed off of a bunch of things that I'm pretty sure would have been okay. But if my partner's not comfortable, it's just not going to be fun. And I don't want to be in responsibility of, if something did happen, or if something did go wrong, I don't want them to like pay the price for my arrogance. So yeah, like I was trying this huge ski objective the other day with my friend, and it was really windy. It was not a good day to be out there, really. But I felt like we could have kept going, and she didn't. She's like, no, we shouldn't do this. And I was like, okay. So we just bailed, and we're going to go back to that. But then I have had a partner who felt like we could have kept climbing. Last year, we bivvied high on this mountain face. We dug a snow cave through we're like halfway up. We're more than halfway up, and we bivvied in this little snow cave, and then in the morning it snowed. It had been snowing all night, and Spindrift was running down the line we were going to climb, and he was like, I think we can climb it. We can climb with Spindrift. And I stuck my head out the window, and I'm like, there's no way I can climb that. It's just going to be like climbing with a waterfall of Spindrift down. You can't see, you can't look up. I'm like, no, we can't do that. And he's like, yeah, we can do it. We can try it. And I'm like, you can try, go for it. You can try. And eventually we bailed because like physically you couldn't keep going. But I don't think that was more so, that was like, we both really wanted to go for it. That was more like we bailed because we couldn't keep going. Yeah.
So what happens if you have a partner that wants to go and you feel unsafe?
I don't think I would go with the partner who I would feel would make dodgy calls. I'm really, really careful with the people that I alpine climb with. And I have like a select 5 people that I'll alpine climb with. And if those people aren't available, I'll just go solo. Yeah.
You're like, this partner seems too sketchy. I'm going to go soloing in the mountains instead. You're like, that seems safer.
It's safer. I can make my own calls. And I have like mountains that I've like eyed out for those times when I can't get partners. So then I'll go solo those instead. But I mean, I'd always rather climb with a partner because the routes that I choose for climbing with a partner are like way more radical in my mind. But then the solo experience is like as radical as I want to make it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm making fun of you, but I'm actually the same way. Because if none of my friends want to go climbing, then I'm like, oh, I'll just go climb by myself. Because that's like, I'd rather go on a scrambling adventure than go out with some random that I don't know. And it's like, it's like, I have a handful of partners that I want to climb with, and if they're not available, then that's fine. I'll go like, wrap in on something, check something out, go soloing, like, just go putter around by myself and do something else. But because so much of climbing is hanging out with partners that you want to hang out with, and if they're not available, then you'll hang out by yourself because that's fun too.
And partners that you can trust, and that they're going to make a good call. Yeah.